I think it gives me a countdown. It's only the second time I've used this.
No, this is cool.
Yeah, it's dope.
It really is.
All right, welcome to Little Pod That Could. My guest today is Hunter Christenson. Hunter, thanks for being here.
Of course.
Yeah, yeah, dude. And we don't know each other that well. I know we must know each other through basketball. I'm thinking
Matthew
that's
Espinoza?
kind of through Noza a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but yeah, but what kind of there's a lot of things that intrigue me about you, just kind of watching your socials and whatnot. But I want to talk a little bit about you traveling during the pandemic and all that too. But also just kind of we were just talking. I asked you it's 8:30 on Sunday morning, and I asked you if you always get up this early. You said no, but you used to get up at 5:30. So tell me about that. What was going on?
Used to. So it didn't really start until about sixth grade. But from sixth grade until I want to say my sophomore year of college, it was just ingrained in me with a single mama raising two kids is you wake up and you get rolling. You know, you gotta get your own stuff together. And so even just from being in sixth, seventh grade, it was waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning and getting showered and making sure you get your food and getting to school on time. And that just kind of stayed with me throughout middle school, high school, and early college. Is just you wake up early and you get after it. And then as soon as you're done doing all the stuff that you do, then you can relax and hang out and enjoy yourself. But that was just kind of thing where if I slept into about 6:30, it felt like I was really sleeping in. And if it got to 7 o'clock, I was worried.
Yeah.
But
so then how does it end up, where did that go? Just one of those things that erodes over time, or?
I think it's less responsibility I had going in. I'm very blessed and grateful for that, but less responsibility. I think there wasn't anything needing me that early either. So I don't have a dog that wants to wake me up at a certain time. I don't got kids right now that want to wake me up at a certain time. I don't have a work. I work at Basil and Board, and the earliest we get going is 11 o'clock because the door is open.
Sure.
So I like it. So over the years, I've just kind of gone into that and just let my body sleep until I'm ready to wake up, which is awesome. But at the same time, it can throw stuff off. So there will be times where I wake up at about 9:30, but it's, I feel refreshed. I feel great and get rolling. But other times I would try to wake up at 7 and it gets pushed out to about 9:30. And that's when it feels a little bit tough, but you don't feel like you get a full sleep on that. But
okay. So for people who don't know you, maybe let's provide a little bit of context. Maybe kind of tell people like who you are, what you do, anything unique that we should know going in here. Just give me a little bit. Honestly, for me too, because like I said, I don't know you that well.
No, definitely. I mean, we met through basketball. I believe I want to say the first time I met you was at McKay. It was, I think, open
like an open gym or something. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I met you through Espinoza, and he put it a lot. I honestly can't recall what he said, but just say, hey, this is a good friend of mine. And then next thing led every time we had a conversation at McKay, it seemed like it was all right. So, and every single time I talked to you or heard about you, you seemed like an awesome dude. And so it's a beautiful thing. And plus following your social has been really fun too.
Okay.
So I was born in Tualatin and my family moved to Kaiser a couple years after that. And ended up just staying and living in Kaiser from age, I want to say 3 or 4 until about 18, 19 when I left off to college. But went to Kaiser Elementary, Claggett Creek Middle School, McNary High School. Growing up, it was a lot of basketball. It was a lot of track. My family was a traveling family. So my grandpa was the assistant dean of the business school at U of O. And my grandma was just kind of a stay-at-home mom, making sure everything's all right. And during the summer, we would try to make sure that we would go camp about 5 times and then make a family trip about a couple other times. And so it was constantly just getting up and traveling and doing stuff. And if you weren't out and about doing something, if you weren't taking advantage of a weekend, if you weren't doing something along those lines, either bettering yourself or exercise or going out and seeing something new or a new town, that's just not something that that's what we did. That's just kind of what we did growing up.
So do you think that's kind of where, sorry to interrupt there, but do you think that's kind of where you developed the love of wanting to travel and kind of that spirit of exploring.
Yeah. I think that really started with my grandparents on both sides, but more specifically my grandparent on my grandpa on my mother's side. Him being in the collegiate system that he was, he had opportunities to teach in Jamaica and Denmark and I believe France. He ended up taking a sabbatical to China for about 9 months, and so
Hmm.
it's seeing pictures of him and on his journeys. It's seeing him with the locals. It's seeing him eating food and on a camel's back, or what have you. It's seeing stuff like that where it just from a very young age it just interested me, and I really wanted to go see that. And when I was a little kid, my uncle lived in Japan, and he taught English abroad, and from that moment, my mom and dad decided to take me as a 9-month-old baby on over and explore that. And apparently, from what they've said, is I was running around and meeting all the little kids, and I would always have sticky rice and green beans on me from just being a messy little boy, but just friendly and outgoing and seeing people. And so, seeing those when I was about in seventh grade, I finally got to really see the pictures, really see some of the items we took back, and my mom talked to me about it. And that really hit me pretty hard. And so from about seventh grade, I made not necessarily me, but our family made big pushes to go travel. And so in middle school, it was going and seeing Mazatlan, Mexico, and Vancouver, Canada, and certain other places here in the States, and going to Orlando and Disney World and certain other
Hmm.
places, and just getting out and about, and not necessarily going to chain restaurants or things like that, going to the local places, going to, if you're in Mexico, go to places where the menu is in Spanish and not necessarily in English.
Hmm.
It's just things like that. And so after graduating high school, I thought I wanted to go to college and complete that right away, but it wasn't like that. There was that big bug itching me that I needed to go travel, and that was the main thing. Where it's after dropping out of dropping out of Shemekada, I just decided that this was something that I needed to do at least for a while, because if I'm not going to get my studies right, I want to get my travel experiences in.
Hmm.
And thankfully, because of them, they're very supportive of me going and backpacking. But it's kind of sorry, it's going all over the place, but that's
Yeah,
kind of
no, it's good.
that's kind of the family where I grew up with, where it's the go family, and you do stuff, and they definitely brought that travel in. Every chance they get, they always try to go somewhere and experience something new, and it's a very freeing thing when you have a family that's able to support you and has done all that stuff.
So you graduate from high school and then start going to college because that's probably think that's what you're supposed to do after school, after you
Yeah,
graduate high school, right?
Yeah, I mean that was kind of the message that we all got growing up. I mean, growing up,
Hmm.
that wasn't ever a thought. It was you go to middle school, obviously, you go to high school, graduate high school, and you go immediately into college, and then
Right.
you get that rolled out 4 years, 5 years later, and you get rolling. But that's not, hey, it's really not like that for many people, at least from my experience. And so
So you, how far? What was the when was the deciding factor when you were in college? Day one, you're like, okay, no, or
not
like
really.
at what point did you decide you didn't want to be there?
It was the second college I went to. It
The
was
second college.
Yeah, because mind you, my apologies, need to get it backed up a little bit. But after McNary, after I graduated in 2013, I ended up
Hmm.
going to Western Oregon University
Okay.
that following fall, and I was at Western Oregon University for the first 2 years, so 2013 to 14, and then 14 to 15, and
Okay.
then I ended up getting academically suspended from Western Oregon. And that was a real kick where it's like, okay, I have a chance to either do something that I really want to do or keep trying to go down this path and try to make
Hmm.
the family happy and everything like that, because they supported me doing that. And so there's that feeling of like I need to, they're helping me with this. I have to get that rolling. But it never sat right with me. And so when I got to Lane, and just hit me after meeting many different people. I ended up meeting somebody at Lane who talked to me about taking a pause from studies or for your career and going abroad and backpacking. And he ended up doing it for about 10 months. And so him and I got
Mm.
talking back and forth about that. And that's what really piqued my interest even more, is when I talked to a couple professors, they were really on board about it and they thought that was really exciting. But it was just confusing that they wanted me to do all the studies and to get this rolling. But every time I talked about going and traveling, or talked about going to Thailand, or talked about all these other places, it wasn't, I mean, they were excited, but it wasn't the same excitement, which
Mm-hmm.
ended up getting me super excited. And something that, if there's all these places in this planet and we haven't really, if you only live in a small part, you only have so much information, so much knowledge, so much understanding of the world. And the more you get out and about and see other places and people, it really helps you get a better understanding of what's around you. And so that's something that really took me by storm. And so that's the trigger where it ended up having, the heart racing and telling the family, hey, like, I'm not going to be doing this,
Yeah.
at least for right now. And it was tough at first, but once I explained it to them, I went way better than expected. They
Mhm.
very understanding.
And when was that?
I want to say that was 2018 is when
Okay.
I finally made the decision to purchase the ticket and go. And 2019 is when I ended up purchasing my ticket abroad.
Okay. And so because you were like in the middle of the trip when the pandemic hit,
Yeah,
correct?
no, well, because I was I was in Thailand. We Thailand got it January, I think it was 7th. January 8th was the first case, somewhere around there. And
Okay.
I was just leaving Bangkok to go to Koh Tao. And so
Okay.
that
So
whole
you were
month,
in that area too, like where was hot and heavy from the start, right? Like, I mean,
kind of, yeah. Well,
sort of like,
the region, yeah, because
sure.
Wuhan is about I want to say 1,000 miles from Hanoi, and Hanoi is right, obviously, in the region. Um,
Hmm.
so it's much closer. I was much closer to Wuhan than I think there was a little map. It's like the people in Portland were farther away. People in Portland and people in LA, like that distance, I believe, is farther than the distance I was from Hanoi, Vietnam,
Wow.
to Wuhan.
Okay.
And I think that
So
was about 700 miles bird fly.
so when did you let's start before we get into that. Start Where did the trip start and kind of like how long were you out? Because you were places before. I remember seeing that you were kind of in different spots doing different things before all of this happened. Like, when did the trip start and where did you start and kind of what were you seeing before all of the pandemic stuff started?
Yeah, so I started my trip in Bangkok, Thailand, and
Okay.
went south to Koh Tao, and then came back up to Bangkok, and then from Bangkok up to Chiang Mai, and then Chiang Mai back to Bangkok, Bangkok over to Hanoi, and then Hanoi all the way down the coast of Vietnam to Ho Chi Minh City, and then from Ho Chi Minh City over to Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, and then from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, I went. Oh, it was because there's Penang, Georgetown in the north, and I forget the town. Malacca. It was Kuala Lumpur to Malacca, Malacca back up to Penang, and then Penang to Kuala Lumpur. And I mean, it started out amazing. It started out nobody was saying anything. There wasn't any talk about it, nothing like that. But then come January 13th, I was at a I was at a little local bar and talking with a local, and he started mentioning how there's something going on in China, and then a couple other people nearby, the locals that were, they were the ones really talking about it. It was on the newspaper. I wasn't able to read it, mind you, but
Mm-hmm.
you could see people in masks, you can see people, China, and it's one of those where it's like, oh, okay, and start looking into it a little bit more, and I didn't expect it to be what it was. Nobody else expected it to be
Mm-hmm.
what it is now. But it really wasn't a thought. I guess that's kind of the thing at first. They were
So,
talking about it, but it wasn't anything.
how long had you been traveling at that point? When did you first get
My,
over there?
January 5th is when I landed in
Okay.
Bangkok.
Oh, so it was like not that. It was like you were just starting.
Yeah,
Oh,
just
wow.
started.
Okay.
I wish I had I wish I had a
Yeah.
couple prior to that,
Yeah.
but no.
Wait, but you went to a lot of different places in that time. Because when did you end up flying back here?
March 15th is when I
Okay,
ended.
so you had a couple months. Um, you mentioned all these places you went. Can you talk about some of the cool experiences that you had in those places before
Mhm.
we get into? It's like we're jumping right to the
No,
pandemic, but stuff happened in between before that.
like on the trip, it's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I
yeah.
saw you eating like looked like some kind of insect on your
Yeah.
Instagram, but
So, yeah, I think that really was the most interesting. I think the most unique thing is the hostel, first and foremost. I think that really gets people, they don't know what to think. They just think it's beds randomly thrown into a room and that's what you get. But that was the most interesting thing first is the hostel. There's so many different ways to go about it. You have cubicle hostels where each bed is its own little cubicle and you have a little that can protect you. Other hostels are more like this, where there's just beds thrown and then a sheet, and that's your privacy. And then it just varies. But that was one of the biggest surprises for me because I've never seen a hostel, especially here in the United States at least. I've just never seen one. So that right there was very strange. And right when I landed, the taxi driver who was taking me to the hostel, it was extremely nice. I've never met anybody that nice before. And I asked, that's kind of the norm around there. And that's kind of the norm. And later on, you realize that is the norm. And people are nice. And that took me by surprise, too. And was something that was a little bit shocker that every single person I met will either smile or wave or something like that. Another big shocker is the food. Some of the more interesting things I had was a scorpion, was a gator, was oh god, the scorpion really was that was the most interesting one. It tasted just like chicken, but it wasn't chicken.
yeah. Okay. All right.
And then it's traveling. I guess another one is traveling in an overnight sleeper train, and so it's just like a regular train, but then they convert all the seats into beds, and it's about a 14-hour trip from Bangkok to Chiang Mai. And that's how a lot of people do it because you get a night accommodation and food and the travel all included. But I've never heard of a sleeper train like that. I mean, obviously you have different stuff here in the States and you have closed doors and private rooms, but that was more you have the whole hall. It's open. You maybe get a sheet to give you a little bit of privacy, but where you see people sitting in the train, that's where they convert it, and that's where they get to sleep. It's not some kind of room that they go off to. A lot of things that surprised me too was Bangkok, in the heart of downtown Bangkok. It felt like a bigger city. It felt more modern than Portland. It felt more modern than being in downtown Seattle. Everything was clean. Nothing was dirty. There was no, I don't want this to come off the right. There was no homeless people sitting anywhere. It just wasn't like that. So that was another thing that was quite shocking to me too. Stuff like that. And then Vietnam was probably the most interesting place. The people, they come, at least from my experience, they come off a little bit stoic and harsh, but once you get past that, I think they're even nicer than Thai people. It's unbelievable. But from Vietnam too, it's realizing, when I realized how many different resistant wars they were in against different nations, it makes you really think differently about the people and how they go about and how they interact. And just trying to get to know and understand them and their history was something beautiful. And just street food, I guess that's another one. Street food is a beautiful thing.
Okay.
And it's normal. For me, I just found out with chicken eggs here in the States, you got to freeze them because it's a certain coating or something on it. But overseas and most other places, it's not necessarily like that. And so it's just interesting to go and see different things and go have, a breakfast in a way that normally I wouldn't have it here. And you walk down the street. I could just walk out my apartment or hostel, and right on the street, there's 7, 8 different vendors for different food. It's a lovely thing.
And so, pre-pandemic, the experience, what kind of descriptive words would you, was it like the best time of your life? Was it like a time of learning? Like what?
Yeah.
How would you sum that up?
I would sum that up as probably the most life-changing experience I've had. I would say it's life-changing. just because it was by myself, and didn't really realize it was a pandemic until you really, about mid-February is when things started to really take a turn and really. But I didn't know. And, I was living into what I thought was the equivalent of heaven.
Yeah.
I
Okay, so you're loving life, you're learning a lot of stuff. It's this life-changing experience. And then, you're at the local bar and you start hearing the locals talking about something going on in China.
Mhm.
Now, I'm assuming you're like sometimes communicating back here with your family, maybe some friends here, and I mean, it didn't seem. I don't remember really hearing anything about it until Marchish was like when maybe February people had started saying something. March is really where I remember they started talking about it. So when you called over like early on, I'm assuming you were asking questions about it. Were people over here like, wait, what? What are you talking about?
Yeah. Thankfully, I got messages that can hold that truth, but that's exactly what was happening. I was
Huh.
reaching out to my mama and my pops and certain other best friends too, and just
Mhm.
just letting them know like, hey, something's going on over here because I think come end of January or towards the end of January is when they put Wuhan in a lockdown. And so for us, when I was hearing the locals, the way that they were talking about it, it was scary because they don't normally hear about people like, I think that region was about 60 million people, not just Wuhan, but the region itself when they first
Mhm.
found that. So it was very strange that 60 million people got locked down. And so I ended up reaching out to my mom, being like, "Hey, what you been hearing about this? Hey, are you taking precautions? Are you being safe? Anything like that?"
Mhm.
Pardon me, but she said, "No, I haven't heard anything. Haven't really heard much. I heard it's just some kind of thing that's going to go away eventually." And it's
Mhm.
okay. Same with my pops, who lives up in Spokane, Washington. Asking him, "Have you been hearing this? Have you been this and that?" And whether they were trying to do it for my own comfort and safety while I was abroad and trying to make sure that I'm not freaking out too much or what have you, but they too, they weren't. What is it? They weren't concerned about it. I guess that's the thing.
Sure.
And so for
So
me,
were you how do you feel about that then? Like are you like, oh okay, well if it's not a big deal over there, then it must not be a thing, or were you like confused or how were
I
you
was I was confused. I was
okay.
confused because every other person I was with and every other person I was around, they were either talking about it or taking precautions. I mean, doing something. I mean, even from mid-January on, there was billboards everywhere about wearing your mask. And I mean, that culture itself in general. I mean, Japan is probably the best at it, but that area, that culture that they have is that you just wear a mask if you're not feeling well. And so for them,
Mhm.
it's a little bit different. But I mean, from the from I want to say January 23rd on is when they started putting up a whole bunch of billboards where they started really talking about it. And then
Now were
anytime I
you sorry, were you coming across like other foreigners, like people from maybe Europe or and what were they also what kind of news were they getting from their friends
they
and
were
family back home?
they were getting the same thing, kind of. It seems that European travelers, American travelers, and Russian travelers, which I met quite a bit as well, and a little bit of South American, but they weren't as concerned about it either. at
Mm,
least at least the Russians and the Germans that I hung out with, they were not as concerned. I mean, they all had plans and everything in place to have friends come over and meet them on a mid trip, or to go to another place and start teaching, or they just weren't concerned about it and they weren't really thinking about it. And
mm,
that too was kind of setting me off because certain other people that I was talking to that it, it just seemed like the locals were a lot more pressed about it and the travelers were not. And it probably was about wanting to travel more and not wanting the realization to set in or not wanting to think about it a whole bunch. But it was just very interesting that the locals were talking about it. That I believe it was Singapore or Hong Kong. There was a top doctor. I don't fully want to say it, but there was a top scientist who came out and said that like this, all these things that are going on, the city being locked down, not being talked about too much, a couple other factors that went into it, it just wasn't right, and something wasn't normal about it, and that there
mm.
should be more. eyes and more attention towards this thing, but it didn't really happen. It didn't really happen until at least for me in my experience. What's crazy is all of January, just cautious, being careful. All of February, being cautious, careful, still traveling, still making plans, and the beginning of March as well. Cautious, careful, taking plans in consideration. I was even beginning of March making plans for Eastern Europe, but it seemed that right when Rudy Gobert got the
Hmm.
positive, that's when it all seemed to go down,
Hmm.
because everything seemed to be fine, everything seemed to be working. And then the moment that happened, everything overseas started to change a little bit too.
That's interesting because that was sort of the signal, that and Tom Hanks and his wife getting it were sort of the signal in the United States, like, oh, maybe this is something bigger. I remember because when they canceled the Gobert game happened, I remember I was like, oh, this must be serious because the NBA would not be giving up all these millions of dollars if it wasn't a big deal. They're only canceling because something's really wrong, you know. And then it was like, okay, well, and then I remember it's like Tom Hanks. I was like, holy crap! Like my first thought was like, is Tom Hanks gonna die? Like what, you know? Because at that point, no one really knew what was going on, you know. And so, but for you, so that's deep. So March. So are you, because at that point too, Trump, you know, does some travel bans and all that stuff. Are you worried that you may get stuck over there, or I
Not
mean, because
worried.
that seemed pretty scary. Because like, yeah, just like where would you stay if you got stuck? And anyway, so yeah, were you worried about getting stuck? Let's start there.
Yes, I guess that's the short answer. Just because I wasn't in Bangkok at that time, and
Hmm.
Bangkok in the area has the best hospital, and I. I mean, I was trying to make plans to go back to Thailand just for that reason, just to be safe. If I were to get it, that I would be able to be taken care of and
So you
well.
weren't thinking about coming back here yet. You were just
No,
trying to figure out how to manage over there.
yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I looked on all the travel advisories. I looked on CDC. I looked on whose website about it. I looked in all the United States Department of the to try to find something about travelers who are already abroad when something like this happens and what to do. And obviously, it's an
Hmm.
unprecedented situation and things like that. But there was no information. There's no, hey, come home when this is going on, or hey, do this, or nothing like that. And
What
so,
was your family saying? Were they like, "Hey, you should maybe think about coming back," or?
yeah, so come I want to say mid February is when my mom started telling me to come back. And my mom also traveled quite a bit. So for her to say
Mm,
that, it hurt her. But for her, it was out of love and that she didn't want me to, catch this new thing. And
mhm,
my pops wanted me back home too. My best friends were even telling me to come back home, but it was one of those things where it's like, guys, I'm not doing that right now. I'm
mhm,
traveling. I'm on my trip, and everybody's around here right now seems to be okay. And Grant, at that time, it seemed that I was in a better, because if I were to come back home after being in that area, that didn't seem like the best idea either.
right.
It's one of those where it's like, where can I find a spot to camp out for a while? And it was trying to get back to Bangkok, but I want to from March 10th to March 13th. It went from me being able to go to Cambodia, which was the next place I was planning on going to. It went from me being able to go and do that to their border shutting off American travelers, to Vietnam shutting off their border to travelers, and Thailand requiring X amount of time when you come and visit of just being in a hotel. And so it
And
was one.
quarantining. Hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And so it was around that time too that New Zealand ended up shutting off all of its borders and doing it right from the jump. And I had a buddy down there who was able to take me in for a little bit, but I, I just didn't feel right doing that. I didn't feel right going to New Zealand and being in this new country and not be able to experience and explore it, and then just be shacked up in a room for that whole time,
Hmm.
and then have to spend X amount of money again to fly back home when I can just head back home and call it good. But yeah, mind you, I have videos of me from when I got to Georgetown in about March 10th, where I was already making plans to go to Eastern Europe. I was meeting other travelers who we were trying to find different festivals and different things to go to in Europe. And Yeah, like literally that next day, everything was shutting off, everything was closing down. I wasn't able to go to Cambodia because they closed off their borders. I mean, yeah, it really was in an instant.
Well, because
And
I remember seeing like on the news, like all of the international airports were jam packed because people, like when Trump announced a travel ban, everyone was freaking out and trying to get back in to the country. Did you have any experience with that, or were you good?
that was the weirdest thing too, because I that's what we were hearing. We were hearing, I mean, we were seeing things from JFK, Chicago O'Hare, Atlanta, seeing all those
Hmm.
places, and they look, oh, that looked miserable. And
Hmm.
luckily, I met someone who lives in California now who just finished Peace Corps in Myanmar around this time, and so luckily, her and I had the same shared experience. But it was very weird. Like we watched a video on our way back to LA from Taiwan, and it was like a 15-minute video about how we're taking safety into account and how you got to have all your paperwork ready. How you have to have just be prepared for long lines to wait for tests. It took us 8 minutes from the moment that we landed to get our stuff, and
Hmm.
that's with security checks. That's with asking what we brought over, everything. And the whole time, I thought it was a joke. I thought we were being led to somewhere else and then get the process going. But no, as soon as the last person said, "Yeah, you're good. Go get your bags," it's like we were just like that. That's how we're gonna take it. Like that's I get it, fine, but like that, it just seemed weird that we didn't get tested. We didn't get nothing like that. You
Yeah.
know, it was just very strange. So I didn't have that experience that a lot of other people had on the East Coast.
Because, yeah, that is, especially coming back from a region close to the hotspot, it's, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I guess sort of close, but I mean, wow. Hmm.
It's close. I mean that it's like if you were to go to Chicago for a bit
Hmm.
and then come back from Chicago after a couple weeks, you would think that the people here in Oregon would want to get you tested for being around those people and
Sure.
then coming back. I mean, that's the same kind of distance relatively that Vietnam is to Wuhan, that Laos is to Wuhan, that North Thailand is to Wuhan, that it's just so close in that area. And I might have it off just by a little bit, but that's about the same distance. And so it's just so mind-boggling that you would have something going on, like let's say something was going on in Denver or Austin. You would think that the places on the far reaching of that nation would want to take care of it or want to get you tested or would want to do something to get it figured out. But
Yeah.
it was just very weird. I thought we were gonna get tested. I thought everything. I thought I'd have to do quarantine. I thought they would have to tell me to go hide away for a while. Nothing. They just said, "Welcome back home. Get your stuff
Wow.
and get rolling."
Mm.
And
Okay.
I'll never forget that. That dude handed me my passport and just said, "Welcome home, sir."
Wow.
don't want to like, yeah, it was just very weird.
Hmm. Okay. So then you get back, and then what happens? Because I mean, you were planning on. I mean, how long were
Oh
you
yeah.
planning on traveling?
Till my birthday, so June 2nd. So I
Okay.
was planning on going from January 5th to about June 2nd. It would have been a couple days after, but it was about that time. And so I was
Okay.
planning on leaving Kuala Lumpur to go to Cambodia towards the end of March. And then I was going to be in Cambodia from March until April 20th, April 25th, somewhere around there. Then I was going to make my way over to Bangkok for just a couple days, and then from Bangkok over to Romania, and then from Romania work my way up to Estonia and Latvia, and then work my way west over to France and Spain. And I really wanted to
Hmm.
stop in Germany, and that's one place, Romania and Germany, just really wanted to stop at. And so I was making plans to do that, and I was getting my European rail card all set,
Hmm.
routes and everything planned up. Yeah, I was set and ready. I was set.
Hmm.
Everything was planned and ready to go all the way until June for this backpacking. And yeah, due to unforeseen circumstances, had to not necessarily had to, but it was more. I just, I, yeah, it was one of those where it ended up feeling and seeming like a better situation to come back home
For
and
sure. For
it,
sure. Yeah. I mean,
it,
yeah. You
because
don't want to.
Yeah,
The
because like
unknown, you don't want to be stuck over there with the unknown.
exactly, and so it's just one of those where it's like if I could, but at the same time, if I were to get the and something doesn't work, or my car doesn't work here, or my insurance isn't compatible, like, I won't be able
Hmm.
to get any of the help that I would need or want, and so that definitely played the biggest factor into coming back.
Well, I we had to be thinking too, like, what if someone in your family gets sick and you're abroad? You know what I mean? Like, it's
Yeah,
just kind of it would have been a weird situation to be, halfway across the world, or I guess all the way across the world, and not be able to, you know, be around when if something bad happened here too. So I'm assuming
yeah,
that factored in as well.
yeah. There's a few things that played a big part into me coming back, because I definitely wanted to make it work, but with this unknown, and you have so many top scientists just caution and a little bit worried. It just and I went out and messaged my grandpa around that time too, asking him for his opinion. And mind you, he wanted me to keep going and keep traveling.
Hmm.
But granted, other things were getting locked down and shut down and borders closed, so it wasn't really an option. At least for me, I just didn't. Yeah, for me, I just didn't want to get stuck somewhere to the point where I didn't have enough funds to get back home, and then have
Hmm.
to deal with that sticky situation. That's just not something
Right.
I wanted to deal with. And I can always save up money, and I can always work, and I can always do other stuff to go and get that back, and go travel and whatnot. But my health, I can't. Like I only
Right.
got one body. So I
Right.
gotta be smart with it. Nobody, and like you said, nobody really knew what it was. I mean, nobody really knew
Hmm.
at the time how deadly it was, how contagious it was, how anything like that. Nobody truly knew. And so it was just new pandemic, or new virus that causes a pandemic, and hardly anybody's used to it or seen it or bodies anything like that. And so that alone was a big thing, where it's like I'm not around all these people all the time. Mind you, I am right now, but if I go back home, I will have to separate myself for a while just so I don't get them, because they were saying
Right.
10 to 14 days of quarantine.
Hmm.
Still, I think they dropped it down to 10 days, but
Yeah. So now, okay, so you get back early, and then what? You're like, oh, all right, well, here I am.
well,
So you quarantine for a while.
yeah, I mean, it was just weird. I mean, like literally going from a time and a place where if I didn't like the city, I could just up and leave. If I didn't like the
Hmm.
place, I could just go and do whatever. I could just walk outside and get food or whatever. And so to go and have 10 weeks of that, and then come back home to you can't leave. Like you just can't leave your home. It was very weird.
So when you got back, the lockdown was in place.
Yeah, so I came back March.
Okay.
I came back March 15th, and it seemed that everything locked and shut down on March 17th, if I'm correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Okay.
like literally, I came back and my mom was like, "Oh, you probably could have stayed a couple more days. You probably could have done this and that." And it's like, I don't know. There's something up with it. And then March 17th is when they closed off the borders and everything. So it was
Wow.
it was really good timing. It was nick of the hair, really.
Yeah. Wow. Okay,
Yeah,
so you get back and everything gets shut down, so you're just like hanging out at the house or
hanging out the house.
binging Netflix and
For the first week, it was going over a lot of the photos and videos that I took.
mm,
It was
hmm.
just kind of reminiscing about that. It was really locking, because it didn't hit me until a couple days after I got home. And it's like, yo, like you did that. Like you just went and
Hmm.
traveled and backpacked. Like you did the thing that you've always wanted to do. And so it's kind of setting in with that for the first week. And then after that first week, I started to get a little bit antsy and trying to get out the house or trying to do something. But I was being really, really respectful too, as much as I can, because it was my mama's house. It was my mom, stepdad,
Right.
and my brother. And my brother has a weak immune system, and my mom has a iffy immune system. And so I really, for 2 weeks, I didn't leave the room. I didn't really go down much. If I needed something, I asked them to go get it for me. I did everything I could, because I've seen what it was starting to do overseas. And then you start
Hmm.
to see all the stuff in the news, and it's like, I got to be smart. Like, I got to, at least for the first couple weeks when I get back into a place that's not even mine, is to be
Hmm.
as smart and respectful as I can. And so, yeah, for the first 2 weeks, nothing. And then after that, probably, I want to say about a month after, we would do small stuff. I mean, I'd go outside, help them out in the yard. We'd go for a little walk on the streets if there wasn't anybody around. Just kind of keeping it low key, basic, not really doing a whole bunch. But I didn't have a job. I didn't have anything like that. So it's just kind of hanging out and waiting to see if there is a good time to go out and apply. And even then, that was the big thing that kind of came up, where if I do go and get a job, I mean, I'm putting all these other people at risk, because my mom ended up having to move to work at home, which she thrived perfectly fine. But my step pop still has to go to work every day. And it was one of those where there's just so much uncertainty. And so
Right.
I told him, like, all right, I will wait a while until things get a little bit better, or until the situation improves, or until an opportunity strikes for me to have a job. I won't right now. It feels weird, but with everything going on. And then, that lasted for probably a couple months. It lasted until, I want to say, end of May, or towards the end of May. And then that's when I got a message from my GM now, because I used to work at Basil and Board prior to me leaving.
Shout out to Basil and Board.
Shouts out Basil and Board. We're actually doing frozen pizzas a lot now, so shouts out to that. That's
Okay.
great. So
Okay.
good. But he shot me a message saying, "Hey, we need you if you want to come back. We're starting the rooftop again, and I know you need a job." And it was one of those where it's like, yes, this perfectly works out. And I love working for them too. It's a good company and good culture and good people. And so they thankfully reached out to me. So it was a couple months of not even doing anything. It was from March 15th until May 20th, I didn't do anything. It really was a total 180 from traveling the world and doing anything and everything I wanted to literally not leaving my home for 2 months. It was very weird.
Yeah. So what did you fill your time with? Like, how do you fill your time in there?
It was a lot of just different random reading. I mean, I definitely could have taken it and, try to up my language, is as far as going on Duolingo and trying to study a bit more, or reading some books, or binge Netflix. Or I have a hard time actually watching Netflix. I have a hard time just watching TV shows in general. It's tough for me to just sit down and watch something from the start to finish. I don't know why. I just have maybe it's antsy, maybe it's I need to get up and move around. But for me, during that time frame, it really was just trying to read. It really was just trying to watch different YouTube videos. For me,
did you read anything cool in that time? Was there a book you could recommend from?
what was it? The only book that I actually ended up completing, because there's a whole bunch I read about halfway.
Yeah, I do that too.
Such a bummer. But one of them, it's called An Arabian Journey, and I'll try to get the name of the author before, but
before I post it.
Yeah, but it's a beautiful thing. He's from the UK, and he was a soldier, but for him it's about storytelling and traveling. And he wanted, for this journey and book, he wanted to do he wanted to walk and travel the old school way, the Arabian Peninsula. So if I remember correctly, this started off in Afghanistan. No, mind you, I forget where exactly it started, but it's going through Oman, Yemen, and Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, and he's just meeting the different people and cultures, and it really forces you to view these people in different, because he's doing this traveling, he's just traveling and staying with locals and just trying to get a sense of what this place is like, because there's so many different cultures and peoples and religions that are in this area. And so he's just trying to figure out what is all about, what's happening, who these people think actually own the place, or what have you. And so it was just a beautiful thing reading him go through the desert in, I believe it's Yemen. I do apologize about that, but it's just seeing him and how he's talking with these locals and going through a desert and a jungle just to get to another part of the country, because they don't have the infrastructure to do so. And it's seeing how they still live a life of what we perceive of hundreds of years ago. I mean, they when they're out traveling, they pitch up a little small tent, a little blanket, and that's their bed for the night, whatever ground that they can find. And so it was more about just finding out, not necessarily about him, but about how you can't really, until you go and live in their shoes, or until you go experience their culture, or until you at least go experience other people and their ways of life. You know, it's really hard to, and you shouldn't come to conclusions about people, and you shouldn't really come to conclusions about cultures or why they do stuff, or how, all that, or why it came to be. And so that's the one book that I would recommend if you want to get a different perspective of an area that you probably heard differently throughout your life. I know for sure I heard a lot about Saudi Arabia and Yemen differently in different areas, and then you read this book and the people that wants to portray, it's totally different. And so I think that's the only book that I read during that time that
Okay.
that actually that stuck with me, that made me want to finish it, that had my attention. Yeah, I'll try to get the author as well.
Yeah, sure. We can link it in the show notes. Okay. So you start working, but then again, things get shut down, right? Like, I mean,
I mean,
even that,
yeah, I
how did that happen?
mean, I mean it I don't know, because we opened up the rooftop end of May, and that's
Hmm.
when people were able to be out and about. That's when even I think the downstairs was, I think our lobbies were still open, and so people can come in and dine inside. And I mean, we had a decent amount of people all the way through the summertime, but yeah, come that second shutdown, that was just unexpected. I mean, we knew it was coming. We knew what we thought it was going to be around this time that we were going to be getting
Hmm.
shut down. We thought that, okay, after Christmas, after everything settles in, then we'll get hit with a shutdown, or when the Biden transition comes in, maybe that'll
Hmm.
happen. We just didn't expect it to happen right before Thanksgiving, and so for us, it was just trying to scramble and figure out how to manage that, and so where we're not
Right.
too many people working and not doing a whole bunch, but also trying to make sure that we're delivering a great service, and that we're, getting the food out, and just able to match the volume of orders. And it it's just yeah, for me, it's really interesting when you have mom
Hmm.
and pop shops shut down, but we can still
Yeah.
go to Target, and we can still go to Walmart, and we can still go out and do
Right.
things. And I mean, I'm
Yeah.
mind you, I'm still that person that went shopping at Christmas to go to Target to get some stuff. So
Sure.
I really hate too much, but yeah, it's just a bummer, I guess. It's
One, it does seem, I saw a clip of Rogan. There were some restaurant guys from LA on there talking. The president of Barstool Sports, Dave Portnoy, has started like a fund to help small businesses, especially restaurants, because of all the shutdowns. It does seem I've had issues with the lockdown. I'm all for cautious stuff, but it does seem to me like they've hit the restaurant industry especially hard. And I don't know that there's data that shows that the virus was spreading heavy in restaurants. If there is data for that, I would like to see it. But I mean, I haven't heard that. And so it just seems weird to me that they've been so restrictive for restaurants. I mean, the tables being 6 feet apart seemed to make sense. Wearing your mask, while you're not at your table made sense, but completely closing them down didn't seem to make sense. And to see the amount of businesses that are going out of business is something that's going to have an impact long term on the economy as well. Excuse me. Once we are through the pandemic.
Mhm. Yeah.
I
I mean,
mean,
yeah, I'm all for it too. I'm all for cautious if we're able to provide the finances and other things needed to go and have that kind of lockdown and that kind of
mhm.
quarantine. If we're able to have those things met, then I'm all for it. But I mean, from the start, it seemed like it was going great, but then a lot of confusion and a lot of, I mean, when you have different states doing their own different thing, it gets kind of tough. And so
Mhm.
I just, and just rolling with the punches, I guess is what all we're doing. I mean, we can't really complain too much. I mean, it is what it is. You can't really. I mean, you can fight back
So
as much as you want, but it's, and there is, like, to your my apologies, but to what you were saying, I haven't seen any data either. I think the only thing that I've seen is about two different studies, and both of them proved that it wasn't coming from restaurants. So,
mhm.
or at least spreading. It wasn't spreading as much in restaurants as it were in other places.
Yeah. Yeah, just I don't know. It doesn't make sense. What was I? Oh,
Well,
so are you still working right now then,
yeah,
or
yeah. I
okay?
mean, hours got cut, a little bit, and yeah. So luckily and thankfully, I am working right now, and so that's a blessing in itself. Is just keeping myself afloat and able to keep
Yeah, and
building.
that's one thing. I had Roger Schneider from Roger That Barbecue on here
Mhm.
a couple weeks ago. I haven't posted the episode yet. I need to finish editing and get it up. But one of the things we were talking about is supporting small businesses. Basil and Board is a one-off, locally owned restaurant. Have you seen people like are people making an effort to come in and still like I don't know, get food to go, get these frozen pizzas. I have seen those that they're putting those out now. Like, I mean, have you seen people trying to make an effort to do that, or how can people help, support local businesses during this time if they're able to?
I kind of like just supporting anybody else. I mean, kind of like supporting you and your podcast, where it's like a share,
Mm,
a like, and a follow goes a million times farther than you really think. I mean, it's kind of even just coming in and getting a little soda. I mean, even
hmm
coming in and grabbing a $5 gift card. I mean, it's things like that where I mean the gift card too is pretty big because that's money that is going to be used for that specific place, and so
hmm
goes for Java Crew, that goes for Urban Grant. I mean, that goes for so many different places. But I mean, for us, it's yeah. I apologize, but I apologize. You asked something, and I was going off on a little tangent.
Yeah, no. I was just asking, like,
Yeah.
have you noticed the community kind of trying to sort of rally around these small businesses, or
No,
has
absolutely.
it been super empty, or like what's going on with your experience?
I mean, my experience with just where I'm at, it's a beautiful thing. I mean, people really have started to come together, and I mean, what is it? Last week we had three separate people, either from organizations themselves, what have you, purchase over $2,000 in gift cards each. And
Mm,
so it's people like that who they really that support right there is just mind-boggling on its own. But
mm.
having people come in who are regulars or people who come in every once a week or something like that, and
Do you
they
know any of those businesses or organizations that did that?
I do know Family Building Blocks.
Okay.
They ended up purchasing 50 family meals from us, which is a
Okay.
beautiful thing. I forget which dentist office, but there was a dentist office right down the road on Liberty Street. Ended up purchasing about I want to say $1,000 in gift cards. I
Okay.
didn't get their name down. Um, there's a couple of other ones. I personally have those are the ones that I personally seen, and when I've been
Okay.
on shift, those are the ones. But there are definitely more who come in and have been purchasing X amount of gift cards to give out to people. I mean, Ike Box, I think it's Ike Box downtown. They no Isaacs, my fault. Isaacs ended up purchasing a whole bunch of different. I think it was, mind you, I apologize. It's either Isaacs or one other coffee shop downtown, but they ended up purchasing.
Hmm.
I think it was $1,000 for in gift cards from Venti's, and
Hmm.
it's things like that where you have a local shop buying other local shops gift cards and then giving
Yeah.
that out to their customers so they can go. I mean, it's that whole cycle that keeps everything going.
Hmm.
And so I really have seen a support from the community. I've seen a lot of people just try to eat out even more.
Hmm.
I've met what was it? Uh, there's someone who ended up only coming in about once a month or so prior to this whole pandemic happening. And then once it hit and then they realized how much it's been hitting the local businesses, she made it a point to start coming in once a week, even if it's just for a salad or even if it's just for coffee or something like that. It's just the point of, hey, like I could go spend this money here, but to support you right now, I'm going to spend the money with you and to keep
Hmm.
you going and keep you afloat. So
Yeah.
I've definitely seen it with certain other companies. I mean, our company is impossible without partners from different companies. So it's
Well, and the one thing that has scared me about the restaurant industry in this time is that the fast food restaurants are thriving right now. I mean, they're packed, and that was an interesting point that the guy made on Rogan. Little clip I heard. He was saying, like there's no lobby group for small business independent chain restaurants. The food lobby, the restaurant lobby is all run by fast food businesses, and they have no incentive to help small businesses right now because they're making a killing. So, and I did think about that. Like, I mean, it's tough because, if a place like Venti's or Annette's or someplace goes out of business, like they're they're not coming back. You know what I mean? Like that's not something that, oh well, they can just reopen later. Like, I mean, these small businesses, especially in the food industry, it's not like in the restaurant industry, it's not like there's a ton of margin to begin with. Like, I mean, they're running on fairly thin margins to begin with in good times. And so, you know, when you add all these restrictions and the shutdowns, I mean, when these places close, like they're not reopening.
Yeah, that's something that people need to realize is that like Annette's, if Annette's closed, like that part of Salem is gone.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really think about that, but Venti's has been a staple in Salem for I think 20 years now, 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's things like that where if you lose that, like sure, there could be another business or there could be another restaurant or something like that that comes up and takes that spot and moves it forward. But like that part of that history of your town or city is gone off of that. And
But
like you said, it's yeah, it's like you said.
even if a restaurant can come in and take their place, the the likelihood of someone starting a business right now in this economic uncertainty is not very high, unless it's something like another fast food spot, or some kind of like something that has the backing of a franchise or a lot of money. So it's like you're not gonna. It's not like, oh well, if Ventis closes, that's fine because someone else will come up behind it, because that's not really feasible right now. I mean, it's not. This is not the right. I mean, if you were thinking about starting a food business right now that had a restaurant, I mean, maybe a takeout spot would make sense. But if you were going to open a restaurant right now, I mean, I think I don't know that you could get a loan for that. If you needed like a small business loan, I'm not even sure you could get a small business loan for a restaurant right now, just because, I mean, there's no way for you to make money. Like, why would you open right now? So, yeah, it's a weird something that I think there are people concerned about, but I don't know if they're it's almost like the Rudy Gobert game. They almost need like small businesses to shut down. I think in the bigger cities it's happening, but I haven't seen it so much in Salem where, you know, a restaurant that people frequented a bunch pre-pandemic has gone out of business. But I mean, if the stuff keeps going on, it's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, if this keeps going on until February or March, all these places that we love, they're really going to take a much bigger hit. That's
Yeah.
that's for sure. I mean, it's like with Venti's, yeah, the community has really come behind. I'm just using Venti's for example because of the connection with Basil and Board, but
Mm-hmm.
it's just one of those where Venti's is a staple. And once the community found out how much trouble they were really in, I mean, they did a GoFundMe, mind you.
Mm-hmm.
Like they were really hitting rock bottom. Once they found out like that's how hard it was starting to hit these places, I think that's when people started to step up even more. And I mean, mind you, a lot of these places have to convert to the new times. They have to try to do
Mm-hmm.
something modern. They have to try to get the takeout, the delivery. They have to try to get something going because
But
that is
that takes time to convert over. It's not like right away. I mean, Roger said, they have one phone line there. You
yep.
know what I mean? He's like,
Oh, and
and they didn't even answer it.
yeah, I'm sure it just got to a point where he didn't answer any of the calls that came in because he wasn't able to take them. He too busy making food and trying to get other
Right.
people going.
Well, and that's what he said for the first couple of years when things were good, like they didn't even answer the phone. But then once the pandemic hit, now that's like the main way they're getting orders. So like he's having to change the whole way they did business. So it's just it is going to take time for these businesses to be able to do that. How have you seen that? How has that been at where you work at Basil and Board? Like what's the transition been like there?
Luckily, not bad. Luckily, not bad. Because, like you said, with Roger, I mean, with Venti's, I mean that's kind of what it was with Venti's for a little bit. With
Mm-hmm.
Roger, there's a couple more. They're just right at the tip of my tongue. But with them, Basil and Board had a takeout system prior to all this happening, and
Mm-hmm.
we were really pushing for that. We were really pushing for people to get takeout because we knew that we were going to have people come in and get food inside. And so it was a big push of like, hey, we can do takeout. It doesn't take that long. Like we can do it. And then we also started, or we're thinking about starting, the delivery service prior to the pandemic starting. And so we were already getting stuff kind of ready for it. And we were, getting the system in place and the drivers in place, and just kind of getting everything set. And then with that hitting, that was just a big push where it's like, all right, I guess we'll just double down even more onto this. Let's really push this out to people. Let's expand the radius that we deliver to people, and just try to get as many people to deliver as we can. And at first, nobody really used us. I mean, at first, we only get maybe a delivery or two a day. But fast forward a little bit, I think it was last Friday, we did like 50 deliveries about.
Then, well, see, and I didn't even know you guys were doing delivery.
Yeah, see, and that's the thing where it's
yeah.
Trying to get it out and open. But yeah, that's the thing where we do our own delivery service instead of having to go through Grubhub or Uber Eats or Postmates or those.
Which a lot of times I think people are like, oh, well, we'll just Grubhub or we'll just Uber Eats and it'll be the businesses out. It's actually not really as helpful because those services force the restaurants to give them a discounted price on the food, and then they don't see any part of the delivery fees or anything like that. So that's something else too that Roger brought up that I've been trying to talk about on the podcast as well too, because it is important to know that like just because you Uber Eats doesn't mean you're supporting local businesses.
Exactly. And yeah. I mean, at first it was awesome to get people out and about and trying to get them to support those businesses. But like you said, probably like what Roger was saying, there's so many different things that go into those delivery services or into those services in general that the fees and the upmark on your items, or even the discount on the items if they go that way, that it takes so much. I mean, there was a point in time, 1 month at Basil, where half was gone due to these businesses. It's like we can't do that. Like you can't, like it's awesome to bring that business in, but it's not sustainable, at least for what we need. And so that's why we pushed even more the delivery service, because it's just a $5 flat fee. None of our prices change. It's the same price as everything else. And that's that. You can order straight online, and it should be pretty simple and easy. So that, luckily, we've been pushing, and it is a bummer that a lot of places haven't been prepared for that. And mind you, they didn't really need to. Honestly, I mean, prior to this year, I mean, like, I don't know about you. I don't know. Did you order a lot of food prior to pandemic?
No,
like Uber Eats, or, anything like that? No,
not really.
No, have you since then? Have you used?
No, not really. I mean, like only because honestly, I'm too cheap. I don't like to pay the extra fees. So, like it's only in a situation. I recorded a podcast with Noza, and he wanted to get Hawaiian time, and I didn't want to fight the traffic on Mission, so it was like, okay, I'll Uber. I don't remember. I think I Grubhub for that, or DoorDash. I use DoorDash. No free plug. I'm not, but anyway, I use them to get that just for the time saving and the convenience. But most of the time, like I'll just go get food if I want to get it.
No, that's awesome.
What about you?
See, I did for a little bit. I would use DoorDash. I would use Grubhub. I would use those things, but it's more for, at least I was telling myself it was more for just keeping inside. It was just kind of staying indoors and just keeping low key. But I mean, if you really look at it, it was just being not necessarily lazy, but it's just that ease of
convenience.
Okay,
yeah,
exactly. I can get a burrito.
And now
right on my door, like
they're getting smart. DoorDash has a deal where you pay like $9.99 a month, and then you don't have to pay delivery fees, or you pay like reduced fees. It's like a subscription model now. It's like, man, that's so smart, because then it makes it easier. If you're just paying $10, but you don't have to pay it every single time, you're like, oh, well, this makes sense if I get 6 meals. It's so smart. I was like mad that they did it. I was like, these jerks, dude. It's so smart. But really, I mean, a lot of those. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just. It's very smart. That's yeah.
Because pre-pandemic, a bunch of those places, those businesses were operating in the red, and there was some talk. I remember, I think it was Grubhub had spent a bunch of money and was not making any money, and there was talks about maybe them having to go out of business. And I mean, I'm assuming that since the pandemic, they're in a healthier financial spot now. But yeah, it's crazy that the food service, the convenience of it is, yeah, it's dangerous too. I mean, to the small businesses as well. So,
Yeah,
um,
I mean, it's just like those conglomerates, like with Target and Walmart. I
mm,
mean, mind you, like I don't necessarily have an issue with big retailers. I mean, I do for that's a whole different topic, but it's just if it's getting to the point where small businesses can't thrive or even just survive. I mean that's what makes everything beautiful.
mm,
That's what makes community, in my opinion. That's what makes maybe not necessarily businesses by itself, but it's the people behind them. It's the people that drive it. And so it's just tough. It's just so tough when it's things are so uncertain and you don't know what's going to be happening. And one week everything's fine, you're serving people inside, and then the next week you can't serve people.
mm,
Or you can only do takeout or delivery in a way that you haven't done so, or you're not prepared to do so, and you don't have any.
right,
At least from what it seems, I mean, there's no government entity or there's no corporation or something, a body of government, whatever organization being like, hey, here's to help you. Here's how we can help you transition. Here's how we can get you to go from what you're at and make it so that you're thriving in this kind of environment, because clearly it's not going away. I mean, we're clearly
right,
not doing it. Like we're clearly not doing what we need to be doing. I mean, doing it a little bit, but it's something that's going to be with us for a little bit. And so it's kind of a bummer
mm,
that it's just a bummer that they didn't take the opportunity that they had, and because they had a beautiful opportunity to do something, and they just didn't take it. I mean, they just
yeah.
and it just
Well,
I
I
guess
think
that's
the pandemic has kind of exposed, and I've been talking about it for a while, that politicians are not leaders; they're politicians. You know what I mean? And this was not. They haven't put out any guidelines to help people because they don't know. You know what I mean? They made, like I said, the lockdown. Let's see the data that shows that the lockdowns are effective at stopping the spread, because I don't think that's the case. I mean, I haven't seen data the other way, but I mean, I don't think that if we looked at the real data, I don't think that you could show that the lockdowns of restaurants have been effective at slowing the spread, and the guidelines they put in place, putting the table 6 feet apart and, lowering the capacity and all that. I mean, I think that stuff was probably fine too, probably the same level of efficacy without having to shut the business down, but again, did they have restaurants and local business owners coming in to help shape the guidelines and figure out how to make it work and make it safe with, healthcare professionals? No, they just made a decision and then said this is what's going to happen. So I don't know. I've definitely not been impressed by the government, but I haven't been impressed with the government for a long time. So
yeah, no, it's yeah, yeah. I guess that was the thing for me where it like I, let's forget about China if you will. If that's how so set you are on certain stuff, let's forget about China. I mean, Italy and Spain had this prior
mhm.
to us, and they were screaming from the rooftops, and they were like literally. We can go back and see all the videos that they were making, and all these people like,
Mhm.
yo, like, take this serious. And
Mhm.
so I think it's just thinking back to that moment in time where it's we had all this time and we had all these different things, and it's like we have an opportunity right now to keep like not necessarily keep our position, because I believe the United States has definitely fallen over the course of even the last 10-15 years.
Mhm.
But it's like it's just that one last little stretch to protect your people and to keep your people afloat, and to really make it known to the world that you're not a slacking nation and that you
Yeah.
can still uphold the promises and the responsibilities that you think.
Well, and I felt like there were some missteps, Fauci telling people at first that masks weren't necessary and weren't effective because he didn't want everybody to, buy all the stuff. Like that was a stupid,
That was
stupid mistake, because it then made people think, well, is the government just lying to us? And I think the miscalculation there was that he didn't realize that everyone already doesn't trust the government on both, whatever side of the political spectrum you land. Everybody is distrustful of what's coming out of the government. So then when it comes out that they actually lied about the pandemic, then I think people are like, well, why would we listen to anything that you say? And then, like you were talking about how in Asian countries, it's more it's more common to wear masks when you're sick, and it's more just like a courtesy. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Like, hey, I don't want you to get sick. I'm feeling sick, so I'm gonna wear a mask. Like, I remember someone had posted a meme about that. You know, they were talking about how dumb it was in this country that there was even this issue about wearing masks, not wearing masks, and they were saying, you know, in Asian countries, this is just a courtesy. Thinking like, yeah, like that is like, because I didn't have an opinion on masks, whether there was, you know, I wasn't a staunch anti-masker or whatever, but I mean, I was wearing masks, thought it was made sense. But then when I was like, yeah, why are people like, even if you like, this is my right to not wear a mask? Well, yeah, but just don't be a jerk. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, let's just make
Yeah.
sure we try to keep people from getting sick. You know, it's not, I don't know,
No,
but to think of it with that mindset made a lot of sense for me. I'm like, yeah, why are we so resistant to this? It's not, I don't know. It's they're not taking away our rights, just a chance
no,
to maybe not get people sick.
no, exactly. I mean, that's kind of the thing where it's like none of your rights are being taken away. You're not being nothing's being stripped off the amendments. Nothing's
Mm-hmm.
really, in the bill of, like nothing like that. It's just a simple little thing that you put on to protect your. I mean, if I'm hacking up a lung and feeling sick as a dog, but I still need to go out and get groceries. Luckily now times are a little bit different, but I mean, back
Mm-hmm.
you just get up, put on a mask, and do your best to not really interact with many
Right.
people. Whereas here,
Meanwhile, yeah, you know, meanwhile you have, you know, the Patriot Act that happened after September 11th. That's like way more restricted people's rights. But you know, I don't know. It's just crazy how we've just become, because when you talk about like the fall of the American society, I just think we've become so reactionary. You know, like we can't have conversations where people disagree. People aren't as thoughtful anymore. You know, they're just like something happens, they react. Like however they feel about it in the moment becomes like the hill they die on. You know, and it's like I can't remember who I was talking to, but did a podcast. They were talking. Oh, it was my friend Brian. He was talking about Joe Rogan and kind of taught him not to be married to your ideas. I thought like that phrasing was really good. I think in this country we are too married to our ideas.
very much so.
You know what I mean? And it becomes like
So
no matter what it is, it used to be just like religion or whatever, but now it's like anything, you know, anything at all can become this issue where, you know, like it's crazy to me that masks became a political issue. It should have never even been a political issue.
yeah, a little cloth thing, a little
Mm-hmm.
small thing you put on became one of the biggest issues in
Mm-hmm.
America for whatever reason. I mean it. The thing that confuses me and the thing that I saw where it's you have the same, and I'm not going to point because it's on all sides. It's not,
Yeah,
it's
for
on all
sure.
sides, but it's you say that you purchase a gun to protect your family, but you won't wear something that has been proven to protect others. It's one of
Mm-hmm.
those where it's like it's stuff like that where it just gets really like yeah, to the point where everything and anything just becomes an issue.
For sure.
And it shouldn't be like that. It really shouldn't. It should be more, how can I protect you? How can I help you? And I mean,
For
granted,
sure.
there's so many people here, you're going to get oddballs and you're going to get people do whatever, they want. But for the most part, it's not about control. It's not about anything like that. It's just like you said, and kept referring to, the courtesy of
Mm-hmm.
your neighbor. That's really what it is.
Yeah. And I
And
am
it,
a gun owner too, and I think you should wear a mask. So I'm not like we can't
no,
say all
absolutely.
gun owners are off too,
Exactly.
but
Exactly. And I'm not saying that at all. I'm just like my step pop's a gun owner, my best friend gun owner. I'm all
mm,
for it. But it's the ones, at least for me, the extremists that are like, well, I can do
for sure.
whatever I want, so I'm not going to wear this thing, or I'm going to do whatever. But it's like I see you wearing a seatbelt when you're driving your
Mm-hmm.
car. Like, why are you wearing your seatbelts?
Mm-hmm.
It's stuff like that where it's like we get upset about certain stuff that's not into our culture or not into our, what our day to day life, but then we
Right.
forget about all the other stuff that we're already dealing with.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's yeah, it's weird times. So I guess we went off on this little rant here, but
Oh,
like where do you see like what's next? Like what's the plan? Like I mean you are you planning on going back out and finishing the trip or like
kind
what's
of, kind of. So I guess this will help back it up too a little bit for your listeners and people. One of the things that I want to do with my life is to travel, and not just travel to experience things, but to travel and try to give either perspective, either a new lens, help, something. And so I, I do plan on going back out, and I do plan on the place I will be going to is Eastern Europe. There's something in between Russia and all their places they used to have, and Western Europe and the history of it. Just really want to go experience that. And I wanted to go at the end of this year, but with everything going on, obviously that
Yeah.
doesn't happen like that. But no, I am planning in 2024, somewhere around there, planning on not just finishing this trip, but then going on another trip where I'll be doing North Africa and more Eastern Europe and Western Asia. So not so much being over in Thailand and Cambodia, but more in India, Pakistan, even Iran, that area, Kazakhstan. Those places really interest me. They more so than South America, more so than Africa, more so than all those places. But no, so 2024, I am planning on doing a backpacking trip over to Eastern Europe, go to Western Europe, down to North Africa, and then over to Western Asia. But I also want to try to start doing stuff too. I want to try to start giving back. I want to try to start doing something. And so for me, when I was traveling, one of the things that helped out a lot, or not even helped out a lot, but that made it so much easier for a traveler like me to travel, was accommodation. So it's finding something that's cheap, either with other people or even just a private room. And so that's something that I'm looking to do with someone or something like that going forward, is to try to go in on not necessarily a rental property, but maybe a little villa or maybe something like that. And that we can then use the profits from that back into it and try to help travelers just travel, and not necessarily worry to even help them out, being like, hey, we have somewhere over here. If you want to go travel, we can get you accommodated, and here's a little travel plus pass, or here's a little food card or something like that. That's going to take so long. I'm not even focused. That's a journey on itself. I mean, all those things are it's going to take time. But as far as me going forward, I mean, yeah. So I wanted to do something later on this year. I had plans to go to Eastern Europe, and I do plan on going to Eastern Europe, but by 2030 is the big one where I want to end up getting a van, and I will, but end up getting a van and start in Alaska and go all the way down to Ushuaia in South America. And that's something that I've just always wanted to do. But yeah, so as far as it goes for me, it's just working, saving money, not being dumb with it, and just trying to save and invest and just think about that future. I mean, that's all I can do right now. Don't really want to go out and travel too much. Don't really want to go. I mean, I do, don't get me wrong, but I just want to lay low and save money and work.
Okay.
And read.
Interesting. Well, once you take these adventures and come back, you have to come back on the pod and update us on what's going on. And if are you going to do like any kind of vlogs or like anything like that while you're traveling or writing or?
Definitely some writing. Definitely some vlog. Not too much. And for me, I feel really weird, and I don't feel comfortable taking a stick with a camera, or even just a camera in general, and going to all these local people, and they just see some white boy filming them. Like for me, it just doesn't feel. But like what I'll do is, like, as I'm walking between places, what I did on my last trip, and it wasn't the best quality or anything, but what I would do is in between, from walking from MBK to a tuk-tuk to get back to the hospital in Thailand, I would take a video and just kind of talk about it real quick, or, send something to my mom or pops or something like that. So that's something that I definitely will have, that I do want to go and do, just because even now, like going back and reading through some parts of my journal or some parts of the videos, it just brings back that feeling that you had during that time frame. And so definitely going forward in those trips, in those travels, I will definitely have vlogs. I will definitely keep people updated. Any information that I can give people or that I can find. Because, for example, like hostels, I never knew what a hostel was until I went and stayed in a hostel. And so each hostel that I stayed in, I ended up getting a video of. I'm not supposed to, but
Yeah.
it's just to get a sense of what a hostel is like, because so many people that I know don't even know what it's like or what's inside or anything like that. And so it's getting that. And so I just went off a little tangent about that, but it's just
So if people want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Oh boy, I'm as you can know from my Facebook messages, I tend to be a little bit slow, and I'm very sorry about that. Instagram is probably the best one for me right now.
And what's your Instagram? We'll tag in the show notes, but what is it?
I appreciate it. It's Hunner DC, HUNNER all lowercase. And I tend to post a lot on my stories. I tend to not post too much as far as posts go, but that's something that I'm changing come next year, because that's something I just want to change and post a little bit more and get that out there. But yeah, I definitely use a lot of my stories, and I'm definitely an instant messenger and direct message as well. So if you do want to connect with me, if people I know other people that have traveled and have a lot more experience than me, but even just a little tip and get things started. I mean, I have saved a whole bunch of my receipts. I saved a whole bunch of my budgets. I saved, all that. So if people do have questions, feel free, and I'm more than happy to answer that.
Okay. Yeah, maybe you should start a blog and start posting some stuff on that.
Maybe. I need to get rolling on something like that.
For sure. We should talk after the episode here. Is there anything else I forgot to mention that you wanted to plug or anything like that?
I mean, just shout out to loving people, I guess. Shout out to the positive people. Shouts out to all the people that just wake up and have a shitty situation, but choose to smile about it. I guess that's the big one, because that kind of makes our community kind of go around. When you see someone smiling and just being happy, but deep down they're hurting or feeling a lot of pain. I mean, it's a beautiful thing driving by and someone's smiling and dancing for no reason. So it's a big shout out to those people, especially during these times. And I mean, I don't got much else. I mean, just a whole bunch of love for everybody.
Cool. Well, thanks for being here today, man.
Well, thank you. And hopefully next time I can actually break down a little bit more. I know that I tend to go on little rants and I tend to go on little side stuff. And
that's what podcasts are for, man.
Exactly. So if people do need or want to know a little bit more about me, I can talk more about that too with them in private. But it's essentially just a happy, laid back kind of guy. That's all I am. Cool, and I appreciate you. I appreciate you bringing me on. I appreciate you being patient with me too.
For sure.
It's really cool. It's the first one too. So
for sure. Hey.
Yep.